Welcome to the Invincible Podcast, where over 9 episodes we follow the epic journey of the 1924 New Zealand All Blacks rugby team, forever known as the Invincibles. My name is Owen Eastwood. I'm a performance coach with a deep focus on competitive strategy and team culture. I'm also the author of a book called Belonging, which sets out my coaching philosophy. In each of the 9 episodes, I'm joined by a guest who is also a friend. Together, we work through that particular part of the tour and seek to extract the timeless lessons from the story of the Invincibles. Welcome to episode 2 of the Invincible Podcast. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Luke Donald. Luke is a professional golfer. He spent 56 weeks as world number 1. He made history as the first player to top both the US PGA Tour and the European Tour money lists in the same year. Today, Luke serves as the European Ryder Cup captain for the second time. In that capacity, I've had the great privilege to work with him over the past 3 years. Just to note, this episode with Luke was recorded last year in 2024. Focus today is on what happened actually before they got on the boat to get to the United Kingdom. And really the best way I would have of explaining it is that it was really absolute chaos. From the moment the team is selected, there's so much controversy, conspiracy theories, political intervention, and a very dramatic moment when the captain is changed the evening before the team depart. Very happy to be joined by my friend and my colleague, Luke Donald, who is going to go through this part of the story with me. Hi, Luke. How are you doing?
Great, Owen. Thanks for having me on this journey. This incredible team that you've given me a little insight into. Be fun to kind of go through it and see if there's any sort of similarities with some of my journey in the last couple of years.
Well, spoiler alert on that. I think there are. Hence inviting you on this one. You are the European Ryder Cup captain. You captained the team last year in Rome to an upset victory over the United States in quite an epic 3 days. And then I think the first time in 3 or 4 decades, you were reappointed to captain the team again in Bethpage Black in New York. And you very kindly have involved me in these big campaigns. Just one little ritual we've got on the Invincible series is that in order to connect with each other in a slightly different way, I've asked you if you'd share maybe a couple of places of belonging for you that are part of your own identity story.
I grew up in England. I was born in a place called Hemel Hempstead. That doesn't really have too much of a significance other than that I was born there, but moved to a town called High Wycombe, which is right in between London and Oxford, and spent 19 years there, and then decided to come to the US to play college golf, to continue my education. That was really important for my parents, and ended up at Northwestern in Chicago, a place I'd never heard of, to be honest, when I was being recruited. But was an important part, again, of the journey. I really had an amazing 4 years. I met Pat there, who, again, I said is kind of been a mentor to me. I really learned how to win in college. I won 13 times. It really set me up into my journey into professional golf. Spent some time in Chicago, met my wife there, who's from Chicago, went to Northwestern too. And now we make our home in Florida. So, we have three young daughters, and once we got to an age of where we were going to put them to school, I was still in the middle of my career, and Florida seemed a little bit easier for golf than Chicago. So we came down to Florida, where a lot of golfers live, just for the great weather and the great golf, and the access to a lot of the tournaments on the PGA Tour on the East Coast. So now we live here in Jupiter, Florida, and this has been home for 10 years or so.
What was your first sort of connection with rugby and maybe also the All Blacks?
Yeah, I grew up in England. We went to a rugby and cricket school, so we didn't play football, which was a lot of schools played. So I played a little bit of rugby and cricket growing up until I was about 14, then kept getting injured. So golf was always my passion, but a lot of my closest friends were on the rugby team, and I played till I was 14. But yeah, we watched a lot of rugby on TV because of my friends were really close to it, and I always remember Jonah Lomu running down the sideline and just running over Mike Catt. I think it was the 95 World Cup, and just an absolute beast of a man. He was unstoppable, and the powers of the All Blacks were pretty evident at that point, and he was a special player.
Why don't we explain how we first connected?
I was kind of thrust into the job of Ryder Cup captain through some unusual circumstances, with everything going in the world of golf. Live Golf came about. Henrik Stenson was originally picked, and I was interviewing for the job as well, but they went with Henrik, but it was made quite clear to us that you couldn't have any involvement with Live Golf, and Henrik, after being appointed, decided to go to Live. So I was sort of the replacement captain in a way, and I had 14 months to figure it out. A little bit less time than most captains have to kind of put together a plan. And so I just tried to really immerse myself into a lot of different learnings, like a lot of reading, try and pick out, understand and meet people who might have some good learnings for me. I certainly understood that, I didn't know everything. I was humble enough to know that I needed to really immerse myself in all this sort of different people, different possibilities, and kind of form my own sort of plans of how I was going to go about being a captain. So one of them was through my good friend, Pat Goss, who'd been my coach for 20 years. I met him at Northwestern, where I went to university, and was my coach again for 20 years, a good mentor of mine. And he recommended your book to me, Belonging. And I read it. Obviously, it was a quick read for me. I'm not a quick reader. I read a few pages, put it down. But with your book, I just flew through it. I was really captivated by everything that was in it, to do with culture, to do with the importance of history, to do with, how much we're much more better as a collective rather than just being on our own, understanding our roles, all that kind of stuff. So it's had a lot of synergy with kind of, I think, what's made a lot of European Ryder Cup teams really, really great. And so, I decided let's reach out to the main guy, see if you could help me on my journey. And certainly, you've obviously been a massive help.
Well, one of the amazing things I found was I wrote about whakapapa, this Maori spiritual idea that whether it's any team, community, organisation, any group of people, we're part of this line of people with our arms locked together, and it goes all the way back to the first team, the origin story, and all the way into the future, the end of time, and the sun just slowly moves down this line of people. And I found this around the world so many times, even the Boston Celtics, where I went and had a great day with them last week, that we all think a bit the same, don't we, about these teams that we care about. And when we got talking, it was just so obvious that these ancestors before you, these great deeds of success, but also the heartbreak, you just had an amazing memory of all of these things. And that idea that the sun just comes on us for just a short period of time and we get to write the next chapter of the story. It was literally like we're talking the same language, and I can see why the book would have resonated in that way. And, that is a very powerful, I think, part of your team culture.
I think the Ryder Cup is so unique because we do play this individual game, 99% of the time, where it's just us. We have teams around us, and those are important, but we're very focused on ourselves most of the time. Individual 72-hole stroke play. When we practice, we're on our own. We have our caddy next to us on the golf course, but you feel very much alone. And then suddenly you have this Ryder Cup, this team element, and you have to figure out how to kind of come together. But it's very inspiring for me. I got to play in it 4 times. I was vice captain twice, and now obviously captain once. But those were the best sort of times I had on the golf course. It's because of the collective, because of the kind of sharing of being around teammates, and sort of the memories and the stories that you got to share. And when you talk to each other, you sort of figure out that we're all very similar. We're very inspired by, the people before me. Like, Sevi was obviously a massive inspiration to me. Bernard Langer, Nick Faldo, Jose Maria Lathabal, all these people that came before me, they were massive Ryder Cup stars, made me want to play Ryder Cups because of what they'd done. And before them, if you trace it back before Sevi, he came into the Ryder Cup when, it was just GB and I, and then they had to bring on Europe, and the history changed, and he was a big part of the success that sort of led us on this pathway of being very, very competitive against the US, rather than back in the 60s, 50s, 40s, where we were losing all the time. So again, I think everyone has their sort of stories, their journeys, but they remember a lot more of them through the Ryder Cup because of the shared experience.
It was really beautiful for me just to see how much the players absolutely, genuinely loved you, reconnecting them with the story, what came before, and then matching that with a vision of what was possible last year, even though the betting odds were not in your favour and the media probably were expecting US victory. Right, Luke, let's get into the Invincibles. And this really, I suppose the big takeaway for me is great teams, and I would put this team right up there with the greatest of all teams in any sport, can start from pretty chaotic situations. So I think there is hope out there for everybody. But if you are actually in a chaotic situation where really the external noise is that you are really not very good and you are not going to do very well, a lot of people are doubting the capability of the leaders, let alone the talent, that if you do actually have the right type of leaders, you can overcome that. And I think that's one of the powerful stories of the Invincibles, is that even teams formed in a chaotic situation still have hope. And
for sure, yeah.
100%. And I know you can relate to that a little bit as well, because when you became Ryder Cup captain, I remember it very well. We met in Rome a year before, and I remember at that time, the betting odds were wildly in favour of the US. The media might not have been as hostile, but they were certainly not giving you much chance.
Yeah, there was a lot of chaos, in and around our team. Obviously, through in golf in general with Liv, we'd had a lot of our stalwarts had gone to Liv. The Sergio, Ian Poulter, Westwood, Paul Casey, Graham McDowell. These were the sort of central pillars of our teams for many years. And suddenly they became ineligible. We were going to have to rely on some rookies, some newer blood. That was one part. Two, the people who now look like they were going to form the team weren't playing that great. Again, the US team was striving. The year before, we'd come off our worst ever loss in a Ryder Cup at Whistling Straits. We'd lost, 20 points to 9 or something like that. It was a pretty devastating loss. I'd been a part of 6 Ryder Cups up until then. That was the only one I'd been a part of that we'd lost. And it was, it wasn't even close. So, Americans had this young, very dominant team. They seemed to have, gelled extremely well during Whistling Straits. And, the media were writing that this was a team of individuals that were going to be dominating the Ryder Cup for the US for decades. And, obviously I came in late with the Ryder Cup captaincy and had less time to kind of, put my own sort of stamp on the captaincy as you would. So there was a lot of chaos. And I had to do some quick learning and figure out exactly, how we were going to kind of right the ship.
That's a really critical part of our chat today, is I want you to take us there, because ultimately Cliff Porter, this 25-year-old, is the captain of this All Blacks team, and he is appointed the night before they leave. And he's quite an experienced All Black himself. And I think you can give us a unique opportunity to get into his head. We can't interview him today, obviously, but I actually think there's so many parallels between your experience and his that it's going to be really insightful. There were 9 trial matches held throughout the country over a 3-week period. Then the team is finally named. Immediately, the team is named. Literally the following day, there are these allegations of, first of all, a very painful one then and it would be now, of racial discrimination. So one of the dominant players at the time was a man called Hohepa Jacob. He played for Horowhenua. He was the captain of the New Zealand Maori team. Quite an amazing story. In 1913, he was in the New Zealand Maori rugby team. Then the First World War broke out. He joined the New Zealand Maori Battalion. Mm-hmm. He was a lieutenant in that team. In the Maori Battalion. He was awarded a military medal for bravery during the course of the First World War. He came back to New Zealand. 2 years later, he's an All Black. Then he's a New Zealand Maori captain. He's captain of the North Island. So one of the big games in those days was the North Island played the South Island. He was captain of the North Island. He was expected by many people to be selected in the team. He wasn't selected. He'd played really well in the trials, but he wasn't selected. And, we're all disappointed when our players we want to be in the team don't get selected. I mean, we all feel that as sports fans. But this was a completely different level because within the New Zealand rugby structure, there's a Maori council. And the Maori council, so within New Zealand rugby, actually made a public comment that they felt that he wasn't selected for racial reasons and that the team overall was not racially fair. This is notwithstanding there were 3 Maori players in the team of 29. But that would have stung massively.
Right.
Alongside that, there was an allegation that one of the All Blacks selected had been a conscientious objector in the First World War. Now, to go back a step here, the war had only finished 6 years before this tour. So this is very, very raw. And one of the things that happened that led to quite a few individuals refusing to fight was in 1916, there was an Easter uprising in Dublin, the Irish nationalists, which was suppressed very heavily by the British government. And in fact, my mother's great uncle was called up in the First World War, and he was one of those people who refused because he would not fight for the British. They had just suppressed his own people back in Ireland. And a lot of New Zealand Irish people felt the same. And an example of that is an All Black in the 1920s named Alfonso Carroll, who was actually known as Fons Carroll. He was one of 10 Irish kids. They had a farm in the Manawatu. And they were very Irish and they were very upset about the Easter uprising and what happened after that. And his 3 older brothers were all called up to fight in the First World War and they all refused to. And he wouldn't fight either, but he did appeal and say that he was the only one left to run the farm and they allowed him for that reason. But after that, the First World War had finished, New Zealand Rugby made a statement that they would not allow anyone who was a military defaulter to represent the All Blacks. And this tour in particular, the United Kingdom, would have been very sensitive. So a month, again, this is so chaotic. This is just a few weeks before the tour. The Returned Servicemen's Association, the RSA, made a public statement that they believed that one of the All Blacks had actually refused to fight in the First World War and that they needed to be removed. New Zealand Rugby were really concerned about this and asked for details, which weren't really forthcoming. And then, and I'm just going to read this out a little bit. New Zealand Rugby then made a statement a couple of weeks before they departed. If it were known that any man actually shirked war service, he would not be considered. A decision to that effect was made some years ago. As far as we are aware, there is no man selected in the present team who comes under this category. Rumours are current, and in fairness to members of the team, who are all more or less brought into disrepute by these rumours, we make this statement. If anybody has any information with regards to any of our players chosen having failed to answer the call of their country for war service, please bring the facts to our attention. So you can imagine that a team is picked a couple of weeks before they leave. The New Zealand Rugby is inviting the public to provide information.
Tell on them.
Absolutely. And as it happened, there was no such information forthcoming, and the team went as selected. So anyway, I recall this very carefully from working with you. Last year when you picked the team, you had 6 automatic picks and 6 captain's picks. And you made some quite bold calls in your selection, and there were a fair few doubters out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we didn't have any racial issues, fortunately, within the Ryder Cup. But again, part of my job was to create a qualification criteria that I thought would give us the best team, and that was changing from 3 picks the year before it was in Australia to 6 picks. I think that gave me an opportunity to sort of get the most informed players and create good partnerships that I think would really be beneficial in giving us the best chance. So with 6 picks, though, it's a little bit more pressure on the captain, a little bit more margin for discussion, especially amongst the public, the media, all this kind of stuff. Obviously, for 14 months, I've been trying to spend a lot of time watching these players, playing with them, talking to them, trying to figure out exactly their sort of mentality, how they were going to fit in this team potentially. And yeah, we ended up picking someone that just graduated from college 2 or 3 months before in Ludwigsburg, and a bit controversial. He's number 4 or 5 in the world right now, so I think we made the right choice. Yeah, again, there's always going to be people that you leave out that are disappointed. We left out someone that won on the Ryder Cup golf course a few months before. And, again, there were certain things during that journey, that 14-month period that I saw that worried me. And, yeah, again, you're never going to always appease everyone. You're always going to, make some decisions that don't sit well with people. Upset people. I think that's the tough part of this job is leaving out people. You'd love to take more than just the 12 guys. But, again, I was pretty confident that we were taking the 12 best that would give us the best chance. And I think you have to kind of stick with the knowledge that you'd kind of accrued during that period of time of getting to know these guys and understanding their personalities and understanding what they could give and figuring out the best matchups. So, yeah, it was, making those calls to the people who didn't make the team. That's difficult because I've been in that position myself. 2014, I felt like I'd done enough to make the team. I was world number 1 2 years before that and didn't get the nod. So very disappointing. But in the end, it's in your hands. If you don't qualify automatically, then you're given some leeway for the captain to see where you might not be deserving of a pick. So I get that, but it's a difficult part of the job, unfortunately.
I think you've raised a really powerful insight there, and that was once you've selected the team, you're committed to it. And what we'll find here, and there's much more of the story to tell, but there was not only that controversy, there were other controversies where there was incredible pressure applied to change the team. The public did not accept it, and all credit to the selectors as they stayed rock solid, consistent and committed to the team that they picked and didn't make any changes despite all the pressures. And I think that sent a really powerful signal to the players of confidence and clarity about what they were doing, which is definitely what you did. And you're underplaying it a little bit, but I remember, of course, a lot of people were talking about some of your selections at the time, not knowing what would unfold and second guessing you, but you stuck rock solid. So let's get on to the next part of the chaotic preparation of this team. And this is another one that you can relate to. And this is not going into this competition as a team in good form. So 3 weeks before they departed, they were in Australia. New South Wales had a 50th anniversary of their rugby. The All Blacks were invited over. From what I understand, it was actually mainly a money-making venture, to be honest, but whatever. They played these 3 games. First game, the All Blacks played awful and lost. And like it is today, it was the same back then. They expected to win those games. But this team that had been selected controversially plays their first game and they lose it in Sydney. And people really were very dismissive about them. In fact, one of the New Zealand newspapers called them a disgrace. And George Napier, who would ultimately become a superstar of this tour, was regarded by one of the Australian journalists as the worst fullback he'd ever seen. So this is not starting brilliantly. They did win the next 2 games in Australia before coming back. And then what happened was quite mad in many ways, but they arrived back in New Zealand on Tuesday, the 22nd of July, 1924, at 10:30 in the evening from this ship voyage from Sydney, which was incredibly, incredibly rough. And pretty much all the players suffered from real seasickness. So it docked at 10:30 p.m. on Tuesday night. They got to the hotel at about midnight. 3 o'clock the next afternoon, they played Auckland, one of the top provinces, to a full house at Eden Park. And that Auckland team were not only good, the players who were playing for them were ones who had missed out on the All Blacks.
Right.
And a bit of background here was the All Blacks there were 7 All Black selectors that year, 7. And none of them were from Auckland, the most populous part of the country. And only 3 players from Auckland were selected. So this was one of the big boys.
They had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder too for getting selected.
Correct. And, it wouldn't come as a great surprise, I don't think, that the All Blacks lost that game. So they
not
lost
great preparation.
This is getting a little bit ugly now. So they lost 14 points to 3. And I'll just read this from George Napier. He talked a little bit about this game. It's worth repeating, I think. He said, on the voyage over that evening before, the wind blew hard, the seas were steep, and all of us were ill. He said, there may be worse experiences, but I doubt it. And then he said, in that condition of seasickness, we arrived at Auckland after midnight, hours late, and went straight to bed. For several of us, there was little sleep and a none too comforting thought, considering that in about 12 hours we were to play Auckland. Some of us got into our rooms only to find that the seasickness was still with us. We were still in this condition when we took the field at Eden Park. I was one of the worst, and when I tried to run for the ball, the field would rise and fall with the motion of the ship. Every time I did this, I would miss the ball completely and go sprawling away over the field. They lose the game. This is a Wednesday, but it's full Eden Park. People had already said that some of these Auckland guys should be in this team. They were better than the All Blacks. This seems to be reaffirmed. George Napier said, we were hooted off the field and immediately the thunderstorm of press criticism broke, never to cease for a single day till we set sail for England. We were called everything imaginable, and the general description was we were the worst team New Zealand had ever fielded. And one of the things that really stung, and I'd be interested if you've had experience of this, is that not only did the media savage them, but a former player of the 1905 original All Blacks, so one of their great players, George Tyler. So this is different, isn't it? It's different when a former player is criticising you versus the general media. So George Tyler said this is the worst team New Zealand has ever fielded. And he said that you would hope there may be enough in them to be competitive on this tour, but he doubted it. And interestingly, the vice captain of the All Blacks on that tour, Jock Richardson, he lived well into his 90s. In his 90s, he gave an interview in his 90s, and he said that every win they had, they would refer back to George Tyler's comments, and they would say another nail in his coffin. So there's something very raw, isn't there, when a former player sort of turns against you and gives you hope. But you mentioned Whistling Straits before, the historic worst result in the European Ryder Cup team's history, and then you pick the team after that.
Yeah, because of that, there was, again, a lot of media leading into my captaincy that the Americans were this young, formidable team. They were never going to lose for years and years in the Ryder Cup. And some of the picks I made, 3 weeks before the Ryder Cup was, criticized. That those weren't the right players. How do you leave this guy out? How do you not take him? All this kind of stuff. So again, noise that I learned that things that you couldn't really control. And that was a big part of my captaincy too. I wanted to really focus on the things that I could control. And some of that noise was not helpful to us. So we tried to create our own little bubble, our own little culture. And certain things that you helped us with, the practice trip and the fireside chat, and bringing these 12 guys together. And we wanted to form this really incredible bond with no hierarchy, where everyone felt like they had a role, that they belonged, that they were going to contribute to this team, that they had a role in the history of Ryder Cups. It was their time for them to shine. You know, the sun was shining on them. We talked about that a lot during our journey. And I think there's always uphill battles. There's always things that don't go your way. There's always criticism, but you have to be pretty stern and diligent about what you believe in. And I think that was certainly a part of my captaincy.
I think something you did really well, and I think was also happened with the 1924 All Blacks, was that you did come off a historic worst loss. That's just a fact, okay? And people do talk about that. It also has an effect on players' confidence. You know, the idea that this is a historic loss and the American team is called a dynasty because it's quite young and quite cohesive and full of future potential. You then come in as a, replacement captain, I suppose you could put it that way. The fact of the matter is your players would have had a right to have felt not overly confident going to that practice trip in Rome. But I think it's something you did really brilliantly, and I think you used analytics to help you do that, is to really convince them, but notwithstanding what had just happened in terms of the previous competition, that actually we are good enough to win this.
Yeah, the practice trip was important, not just to see the golf course. It did allow us to kind of spend some time on the golf course and feel like the week of the Ryder Cup wasn't quite as rushed, and we didn't need to, we already been to the locker rooms, but, sort of experienced everything, so it wasn't so new. But I think the magic of that trip was the sort of bonding that we created during the week. Often when you get to a Ryder Cup, the Monday of the Ryder Cup, everyone's sort of trying to feel each other out. Everyone's a little bit anxious. It's a high pressure environment. You've got some superstars like Rory and John Rahm, and then you've got these guys, some that just come out of college, and Ludwig, and some rookies, and people didn't really understand what a Ryder Cup is about. But, that practice trip, we sort of broke down the barriers, that we had a lot more in common with each other. And we started to form that sort of those bonds and that understanding that we all had our roles, and we were kind of connected together. And I think we had the next week was Wentworth, a big tournament. Everyone played, everyone stayed in the same hotel, everyone sort of had dinners at night, and time we got back to Rome for the actual Ryder Cup week, we were very much a team. And, I think that was important. Again, we are very highly skilled individuals. We're not used to playing together in teams. So to have a couple of weeks to kind of come together and bond was highly important for us. And part of my job then is to just give them the facts. So people are saying this about you. Well, no, actually, no, you're better at this, you're better at that, you're better at this. So we have every reason to be confident that we're going to win, and I think you just want to instill a bit of confidence in these guys. The motivation is easy. It's the cohesion, I think, that, is trying to get the guys together on sort of one sort of idea that, the mission is to win the Ryder Cup, and that goes above all your self-interests. And that's, different to, again, every week we play, but, again, giving them some solid reasons, I think, and connecting them to, the journey and the history of the Ryder Cup, is pretty powerful. Those intrinsic motivators, we understand, that those are much more rewarding and motivating than just a self-interest, I suppose.
I think something you did brilliantly, and Gareth Southgate also did this, is rather than telling everyone to ignore the external noise and the criticism and the pessimism, is that you allowed them to engage in it, but then you did what we would call myth busting. So they are saying this about you. They are saying this about you. They are saying this about our opposition. And actually, a lot of this is just myth. These are the facts, and these are the information behind that. And that, I think, you had a natural way of doing that, which really does build confidence, rather than just, the motivational framework was actually factually.
Yeah,
we should have confidence and belief in it. Okay, well, let's keep going. And now the next category of chaos, which I don't think you've had to experience, but we're still quite a wee way out from Bethpage Black, so it may come up, and that was political interference. So this loss to Auckland is really, really rocking the country's confidence in this team. Some of these Auckland supporters, our most populous area and most wealthy area, a bunch of these well-placed supporters, they go to the Deputy Prime Minister, Gordon Coates, who becomes a Prime Minister the following year, and say, as with this team has just lost to Auckland, this is not good enough. We're going to be embarrassed. They haven't picked enough Auckland players. There wasn't an Auckland selector. That was a big mistake. We want the team to be changed. And we have the money where we will pay for even additional players to be put into the team. We'll fund that. New Zealand Rugby doesn't have to fund that. So anyway, Gordon Coates, the Deputy Prime Minister, he then speaks with the New Zealand Rugby Management Committee members and floats this idea. He then picks up the telephone in 1924 and calls the key All Black selector, a guy called Norm Mackenzie, and tries to persuade him that it'll be a really good idea to change the team at the last minute. And Norman Mackenzie actually wrote a book many years later, and he refers to that conversation. He says, I replied to the Deputy Prime Minister that we thought the team was up to standard. This is coming back a little bit to you, like you stick with it, you stay committed to your selection. Furthermore, we did not presume to interfere in politics and would be very pleased the politicians didn't interfere with the rugby. So
I love that.
Yeah, it's good. He's a short, sharp conversation, that one. But because this pressure's building up so much, New Zealand Rugby, the administrators have a little bit of a wobble. And again, this is like mad. But the day before the team depart, the New Zealand Rugby Union agreed to their management committee having a meeting to discuss for a final time the selection. And quite crazily, they invite the media to sit in on the meeting. So you can imagine that. So imagine that. You and your, Guy Kinnings and others sitting in there talking about the selection and whether you really should make any final changes with all this pressure. And in the meeting, the media are like lined up on chairs on the side of the room, listening to it and reporting it all. And in fact, they had a real debate in this meeting. So the media just sitting there must have been absolutely loving it. They're watching this internal division around the selection of the team, but the selectors would not budge. They just refused to budge. And the team was kept as it was. This kind offer from Auckland to add players and for them to fund the expenses was rejected. And they stuck with the original selection, notwithstanding their form was poor. The following day, the New Zealand Herald, the big paper in the country, noted the meeting and said, the selectors displayed a nervous irritability, which does not indicate confidence in their cause. So you can't win. I mean, they stay committed. Right. You can't win. So
nervous because all the media was sitting on and listening to them probably, and the politicians had interrupted, their plan, their process. So, yeah, I think that's. Yeah, there's always going to be obstacles, right, and chaos, and all that comes with it. It's understanding that, and then being quite committed to what you're doing, and have a faith that you're doing the right things, right? I think the best thing you never want to do as a leader, I think, is second guess yourself. Put in the work, put in the time. That's something I pride myself in my individual career. I always felt like I was never someone that was meant to be number one in the world. I didn't have the attributes of hitting the ball far, which was the biggest indicator of success. I had to figure out my own way to get there. And I think that sort of helped me in my learnings as a captain too, to sort of figure out my own way, listen to a lot of people, take in some, reject other stuff, and figure out what I thought in my gut was the right thing to do. There's obviously some similarities with the All Blacks here. They were pretty they had a lot of noise in the background, but they were still pretty steadfast in what they were doing. They had a real belief in the guys that they'd picked, and they were going to go forward. And that gives a lot of confidence within the team, I think.
These principles of not panicking, staying committed, and the impact that has on individual athletes is massive. If they see a chaotic, erratic, inconsistent group of leaders around them, then of course it doesn't exactly build trust, because they find it hard to predict what they're going to do next or where they stand. So no, those principles, absolutely. And so the final bit of drama, and I think it is the most dramatic of all, is around the captaincy. So there had been an understanding really for months that this selection of the captain was going to be quite sensitive. And the reason being, on a tour to the United Kingdom, to Ireland and to France, there's a lot of speeches that were going to have to be given. And you can't help it. You did a spectacular job of this in the opening ceremony last year in Rome, but you have to give big speeches. And the team is judged a little bit on how they go. You are the ultimate ambassador for the team in multiple ways. So the All Blacks New Zealand Rugby were very clear. They needed someone who was a good speech maker to be captain as well. That was quite important. And also in those days, Britain was more of a class society probably. There were a lot of lords, even the Prince of Wales and the King, Churchill, all these people they were going to meet. And they wanted a captain who was able to basically look people in the eye and stand their ground. And project some form of sort of colonial confidence. So apparently the person they wanted was Dr. Arnold Perry, who played for Otago. He was a medical doctor from quite a blue blood family, great speech maker, all the rest of it. Unfortunately, in all these trial games, he was just terrible. He just played so badly. And he admitted that himself, and he just was not good enough. Then when they went on this warm-up tour to Australia, to Sydney, Cess Baddeley, who was from Auckland Grammar, he played for Auckland. He was a World War I veteran, an absolute gentleman, very well liked and respected. He was the captain. But in the very first game, which I mentioned we lost in Sydney, he was badly injured. That was not helpful, the fact that he was the interim captain and he had an injury. But also, after they lost to Auckland, the following day, there was a farewell to the Auckland players in the Auckland Town Hall. And he gave a speech thanking everybody for their best wishes. And he made a couple of comments which would not have gone down very well at all. First of all, he said that from a personal point of view, he regretted there weren't more Auckland players in the team. Okay. And secondly, he said that although they will try their best, it would be very daunting to try and match the record of the 1905 team who had played 36 games and won 35. That wasn't a great ringing endorsement of confidence in the team either. So those things would have been noted by New Zealand Rugby. They didn't really enjoy that. The obvious on-field captain was Jock Richardson, who comes from Southland, my place of belonging. He was another World War I veteran, but a real Southlander and pretty gruff. He definitely was not going to be a great speech maker, and he wasn't really going to be able to do it with the upper crust in Britain either, really. It's not his thing. He was really good on the field, just led by example, good rugby IQ, etc. So they didn't, although he would have been a good captain, they decided not to. Ironically, he ended up captaining him in 3 of the 4 test matches on the tour through circumstances and did a brilliant job. So this is the final day before they leave. At 1:00 in the afternoon, Parliament has a farewell function. So they're all there. Governor General, the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, both parties, they're all there. And Cess Baddeley, who was the captain on that warm-up tour, he is in the top table and he gives a speech on behalf of the team thanking them for their best wishes. So that's all great. 4:30 that afternoon, New Zealand Rugby Management Committee meet privately and decide to replace him as captain with a 25-year-old Cliff Porter, who was a very inexperienced All Black, who had been playing very, very well at the time. At 5:00, half an hour later, there is another function with the Mayor of Wellington wishing them well. Cess Baddeley is still at the front table and still gives a speech on behalf of the All Blacks. 7:00 in the
captain.
No, and he doesn't know it.
He doesn't know it though.
No one knows. Literally, no one knows it except the management committee.
Wow.
Then at 7:00 that night, and they have a dinner with New Zealand Rugby's final farewell dinner. It's at the Grand Hotel in Wellington. This is, 2.5 hours after this meeting. They still have Cess Baddeley at the top table, Cliff Porter at the back of the room, and Cess Baddeley is giving a speech on behalf of the team thanking them. That evening at 10:45 p.m., Cliff Porter, this 25-year-old who thinks he's just one of the back crew, is called into a meeting at New Zealand Rugby at 11:15 at night before they go the next day. And he is told that they've made a decision that he will captain the team. And this puts a real spanner in the works because he says, no, I don't want to. Cess Baddeley has got the respect of all the players. I don't want to replace him. They plead with him. 3 times in that meeting, he says no. No. So he leaves about midnight.
Understandable.
100%. It's about there's midnight the night before they leave on the boat. And he has said no, and he's gone back home. He's from Wellington. The following morning, he gets up to finish his packing, and he chats to his mum, and he explains what had happened. And she actually says to him, you have to accept the invitation. They are doing it in the best interest of the team. They know what they're doing, and you need to honour that. So she convinces him that he should accept it. So he goes back into Wellington that morning, and he explains to them that on reflection, he will accept the captaincy. Later that morning, all the team assemble for the final time before they go to the docks. And it's there that they are told together that Cliff Porter is the captain of this team, and Cess Baddeley is sitting literally in this room hearing this. And he's an absolute gentleman, but it was recorded how clearly shocked and agitated he was by.
I can only imagine.
Absolutely. And then at 4:00 that afternoon, they depart. So I'd absolutely love to get your insight. You were not appointed the night before the Ryder Cup, but you're appointed in historic terms not much later than that. And there's 1,000 things to do, and there's 1,000 people giving you advice on what you should do. One of the things I saw you close up working with you is that you were like, set yourself really well right from the start, just sorting yourself out. And then also you just focused on a couple of key things and really tried to do them well, rather than 1,000 things. It'd be brilliant to take you. I think you've got a unique opportunity to take us into the mind of Cliff Porter when all this is bestowed upon him.
Yeah. So again, we've touched a little bit on how I became captain. There was 4 of us that put ourselves forward for the opportunity to be captain. And the media was all saying, "Oh, Luke's going to get it." It looks like Luke's going to be named captain. And then the tour announced that Henrik gets the captaincy. And obviously a lot of a wave of emotions, very disappointed, thinking that potentially I've lost my opportunity to be the captain ever. Maybe I still have a chance down that road, but it's quite disappointed, obviously. And then, things happen over the next couple of months with everything going on in the world of golf with Liv and and Henrik decides that was the path he was going to take. And suddenly it becomes open again. And there's even more discussions here. Well, who's going to be? Is it going to be me? Is it the other 2 candidates? Is it now we have less time? Is there going to be a past captain that's already kind of been through it that doesn't need there's less time to be prepared? So there was, again, more turmoil. They didn't know what was going on. There was not great communication from the DP World Tour, to be honest. I was trying to talk to them, what's going to happen. I was trying to talk to players. Would you want me to be your captain? Just if you do, talk to the tour, put yourself forward and say, if you don't, then that's fine too. But give them some sort of direction about what you guys would want, as teammates. So in the end, I got the call, and the wave of emotion with everything happening, having less time to do it. Am I ready? I think you always have those sort of doubts, those fears. Can you do it? Again, I'm sort of a little bit more of an introvert. Do I need to is that personality okay to be a leader? Do you need to be this extroverted speech maker, motivator, all that kind of stuff. That's sort of not my personality. But, again, I think once I'd come to the realization that I was the captain, then it was about trying to make a plan. Again, I think I've always done that well in my career, come up with good, legitimate plans of how to be successful, how to keep improving day in, day out, do something a little bit every day to be a little bit better the next day, and I think I sort of followed that ethos. I followed an ethos of trying to be comfortable with myself. What was I going to do? I was going to always say what I did, create trust amongst the players, talk to them a lot, communicate with them a lot, try and create some clarity amongst the players about what I was thinking, what I was, I didn't want to be in a situation where I felt like I was leading up to the captaincy, where I didn't know what was going on from the powers to be. I wanted to maintain some communication and clarity amongst the guys, and get to know them all well and kind of form trust that way. So that was sort of how I started. And then, I started reading a lot on leadership. I tried to talk to people like you and many others to try and help guide me along the journey. I think, I was humble enough to know that I didn't know everything, but I was smart enough to know that I want to surround myself with smart people. And, I think that really helped me a lot. And then it was all about trying to create an environment, a culture that the guys who are going to make that team were going to be successful.
Yeah, one of the things you did really well was, which I often see leaders miss, is that they go straight into the work of the team and into that context and don't quite get their own clarity and on themselves. We did that compass exercise. You were, just a very simple exercise anyone can do, where we think about the North Star being what would a vision of success look like, and making it three-dimensional, not just holding the trophy. Obviously, it was a lot deeper than that. I love the way that you approached it. You talked about things like the players respecting you, whatever the result would be. You talked about, your family as part of the story of what success would look like. And then the South, as we talked about, is these the non-negotiable values. So you need to be able to look yourself in the mirror when this exercise is done and know that you didn't compromise on those things. And then West was your well-being, what things you need to do to take care of yourself, because it was a completely different rhythm and different types of stress having this role. So you need a couple of things to lock in there to keep your well-being in a good place. And then on the East was a couple of areas where you really needed to grow pretty quickly in order to be an effective leader with that team, which you did in a pretty spectacular way.
Thank you.
When we talk about whakapapa before, and we talk about having an identity story where you really cued into the story before you, Cliff Porter 100 years ago still is an archetype of an All Black captain, I would say. He was very composed, very, very humble, was very selfless. And as we get into the tour, we'll see he was stood down for some of the biggest games because another player was playing better than him at the time. That takes a hell of a lot of selflessness for a leader to be able to do that in that context. He was extremely relational. And again, we'll tell stories about how he got the best out of people like George Napier by really, in a way which was sort of not common in society really, but he just connected with everybody in the same way. So it's one of the powerful legacies to me is that, when we have these great connection with our whakapapa, is that we're able to pass down these sort of archetype of what the best version of us looks like and connect the players of today with that and let them bring it to life in their own way. And obviously working with you in the Ryder Cup team, you do that in an amazing way, I think, in an incredible way. And Sevi Ballesteros is definitely one of those absolute archetypes of the best version of this team. Of course, you even had a locker with all the other lockers in Rome for him. Very, very powerful statement around that.
Yeah, Sevi is, the sort of the ultimate kind of Ryder Cup player for us, just because of what he went through. I think a little bit of disrespect maybe is the word. Things were different back in the 80s when he was at his height. Not many of the Europeans traveled to the US, but he knew he wanted to come over. He wanted to play major championships. He wanted to play on the US tour. And, they didn't really welcome the Europeans that much. But he proved to them that he could win. And I think he loved what the Ryder Cup represented, the passion, the togetherness, the underdog mentality. And I think, we were always known as the underdogs. And that's been an important part of our culture and our messaging as well, because on paper, we're always not as highly ranked as some of the US teams. But I think what we make up with that is kind of our shared vision of success, about, putting sort of those self-interests to one side and playing for more than yourself, which, again, Sevi loved. Sevi just absolutely lived for the Ryder Cup. So it's important to have those historical people, and there'll be more people like this. I talked to Rory McIlroy a little bit about this last week when he tied Sevi's record for 6 Race to Dubai's, and now he's going to have that part of his legacy, and people are going to look to him like they look at Sevi. And I think it always gets passed along the line, doesn't it? But Sevi for us was sort of Sevi and Tony Jacklin as well. The first captain to really give us a team room, proper clothing, like team clothing, make us feel like we were special, like we actually belonged to each other, that we had an opportunity to beat these strong American teams. So, you need figures like that to sort of guide the history and give your team, a real sense that you do belong.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much for joining me on this episode. I honestly couldn't have thought of a better person who can really relate to this quite dramatic context of the team being selected and all this drama that unfolded before they actually got on the boat to go to the UK. So thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure, Owen. All good, all great teams are born out of chaos, I think, and it's how you frame it, right? Have a good, clear plan and create a good culture, and I think you've got a good opportunity to succeed.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to follow this podcast and leave a review and any comments that you might have. If some of the core ideas that we explored today resonated with you, you might enjoy diving into my book, Belonging. See you next time.